The Angels are the worst run organization in pro sports. That includes the Pirates, A's, Rockies, White Sox, Giants, Jets, Raiders, Wizards, Hornets, all those bad hockey teams. The Los Angeles Angels are worse. Players, scouts, baseball operations, team physicians, executives, they're all infected with team owner Arte Moreno's loserdom. I've talked about how much this team frustrates me before. 2 of my biggest videos ever are largely about how incompetent this franchise is, but their scope does not cover how much I detest this organization. People talk about the Dodgers ruining baseball with their spending, or their deferrals, or the cheap teams like Oakland or Pittsburgh, but the real danger to MLB resides in Anaheim. If MLB had just a few more teams like the Angels, it would be in danger of going extinct. The Angels' diseased culture has led to both the least competitive team in baseball and the tragic death of Tyler Skaggs. These are the 2 defining aspects of the last decade of their franchise. One of them is a normal outcome for a typical dysfunctional sports organization. The other is not, and that's what sets this team apart. Understanding both of these aspects is necessary to understanding what the Angels truly are. First things first, roster construction. Before I get to how they totally butchered Shohei Ohtani's last years in Anaheim, I need to cover how this team drafts. They grab headlines for all the wrong reasons. The 2021 Angels drafted 20 consecutive pitchers. New GM Perry Manassian used every single pick on pitchers because their pitching was so weak. 19 of those pitchers were college level. So analysts deduced that the Angels were looking to shore up their pitching as quickly as possible. 4.5 years later, only 3 have made the bigs, combining for 0.9 BWAR and 154 innings pitched. When you account for trades they've made, including players from this class, they've netted negative 0.5 WAR from the 2021 draft. The only MLB players from this draft who are still on the Angels are Sam Bachman and Chase Silseth, neither of whom look all that great. This draft was a patented Angels shortcut. They had Ohtani and Mike Trout playing at high levels. They needed pitching, so they drafted a bunch of older pitchers. Drafting is incredibly difficult, but it's also random. With 20 picks, at least one of the players should be good just based on that randomness. But they boxed themselves into one strategy, limiting the type of player they could pick. Using basic logic, there's no way the best player available happened to be a college arm in 19 of the 20 rounds. This strategy resulted in a 3rd round pick who they traded for half a season of easy out Escobar. They made these picks because of their short-term needs, which is a ridiculous strategy for any draft, but especially in baseball. Good teams pick the best players available in every round. They pick players of all kinds with high ceilings that they project will grow and develop into great MLB players. Which brings us to a related issue. The Angels cannot develop players. In the last decade, the Angels have had just one double-digit FWAR pitcher, Shohei Ohtani. They've had 4 such position players: Ohtani, Trout, Andrelton Simmons, and Taylor Ward. Ohtani obviously did a lot of developing here, but he was also a very good pro already in Japan, and he's a generational talent who probably would have been great anywhere. Same as Mike Trout, who did most of his development closer to the year 2000 than the year 2025. Simmons was already a generational defender when the Angels traded for him. Taylor Ward is one of their only successful developments in the last decade. He stopped at every level of the minors, changed positions multiple times, shifted his approach to the plate, and continuously got better, even after making the bigs. He's the first exception to the Angels' rule. The second and final exception is Zach Neto, who spent just 44 games in the minors before debuting with the Angels, completely skipping AAA. I cannot overstate how lucky the Angels got here. His minor league stats were good but not mind-blowing, and the Angels threw him right into the fire in 2023. He struggled for a bit, then took massive strides on offense each of the last 2 seasons. The fact that they've developed so few position players tells me that Neto's talent is transcendent. He also probably would have figured it out elsewhere. The Angels have been handling prospects just like this for the entire decade. Draft a player as close to big league ready as possible, circumvent any type of minor league progression if possible, then call them up to sell some tickets for their home debut. The success rate is low. Let's check every first rounder of the 2020s, all of which were picked in the front half of the round. 2020, Reed Detmers out of Louisville, 13 minor league appearances before debuting. 2021, Sam Bachman out of Miami University. Despite repeated injuries and an astronomical walk rate, he pitched just 23 minor league games before debuting. 2022, Neto, 44 games. Kudos to the Angels for the pick, but he succeeded in spite of the developmental strategy, not because of it. 2023, Nolan Shanuel out of Florida Atlantic. 22 minor league games, 17 at AA and none at AAA. He debuted in August, 36 days after signing with the team. I'll come back to him in a minute. 2024, Christian Moore out of Tennessee. 79 minor league games. He had a sub 800 OPS in the minors this year when they promoted him. And guess what? He looked nowhere near MLB ready once he was recalled. That's a combined 181 minor league games between the Angels' last 5 first rounders before debuting with the big league club. Like I said, they got extremely lucky with Neto, who's the best player in his class by a long shot. As for Shanuel, he's an everyday player who has hit above MLB average in his career, which already makes him a solid pick by default. My issue with them specifically picking him so high is his lack of ceiling. He's a low-power, unathletic first baseman. His hit tool was elite in college and already MLB caliber at the time of the draft. But outside of the most incremental of slugging improvements, he's essentially the same exact player today as he was when he was drafted. There's a reason the minor leagues exist, and there's a reason college players don't start in the majors after the draft. Teams with good development let their guys make changes in the low-pressure minor league environment before throwing them into the fire. Shanuel's entire 2023 offseason was centered around improving his endurance because he'd never played a full pro ball season before. Most rookies are working on aspects of their actual game, not focusing on standing up all day. He hasn't made any major swing adjustments that could potentially open up his ceiling since joining the Angels. No developmental risks taken, because they drafted him and rushed him up to be the player that he already was. And even if Shanuel takes a big leap next year and develops into a truly great first baseman, he'll already be entering arbitration by next offseason. Even though Neto's been great, he had to get a lot better once he was already in the league, and he's already in arbitration. And to be clear, these guys are the only 2 successful outcomes of this strategy. They did the same thing with 2024 second rounder Ryan Johnson this season. He was drafted with the compensation pick they got for letting Ohtani walk. Guess how many games he pitched in the minors before debuting? 20, 15, 10, 5, 1, 0.
0.
He pitched 0 minor league games before debuting for the Angels on opening day of this season. Let's take a wild guess on how that went.
Gone! And that one's gone!
The Angels were using an average stuff starter with 0 professional experience as a high leverage MLB reliever. Extremely high risk, extremely low reward. The guy doesn't have strikeout stuff to be a Garrett Crochet or Chris Sale out of the bullpen. He got shelled. They sent him all the way down to single A to start, and he finished out the year pretty damn well down there. Maybe if he started there, he would have done well enough to finish the season in Double A with extreme prospect hype and 0 MLB service time. But no, that would make too much sense for this team. Just this year, they picked Tyler Bremner second overall. He wasn't a top 10 pick on any of the major mock drafts, and they picked him second over consensus top 5 picks like Cade Anderson and Ethan Holiday. It was a shock to most of the baseball world. Once again, they got headlines for all of the wrong reasons. Who knows? Bremner could be a great pitcher. He's still a great prospect regardless of how shocking the pick was. But at this rate, they'll give Bremner the opening day nod next April and be surprised when he gets shelled. The next aspect of roster construction that really pisses me off about this team is their fascination with name brands. This summer, I made a video about Peter Bendix, the president of baseball operations for the Marlins. One of the main reasons I believe in his strategy is his acuity for finding surplus value in the margins. Waivers, Rule 5 draft picks, minor league free agents. The Marlins have used their low expectations to their advantage by finding and developing discarded talent on the fringes of their roster. The Angels do exactly the opposite. The guys they bring in to fill in their bench and the bullpen are all pedigree and no ability. Former prospects like Touki Toussaint, Jake Eder, Oswald Peraza, Ian Anderson, Scott Kingery, Carter Kieboom, Miguel Sano, Keston Hiura, Cole Tucker, and Carson Fulmer have eaten up innings and plate appearances over the last 2 seasons alone. These names give illusions of upside. High draft picks or former top prospects were once highly regarded for a reason, but over years and years of minor and major league failure, when these guys don't produce or progress, they're simply not valuable. The best result of this strategy was Mickey Moniak, who put up 2.2 BWAR in 2023, but has accumulated negative 0.7 since. And he was a little different in that he was an actual return piece in a real trade. The Angels do not have the pro scouting infrastructure in place to make good finds. Ask yourself, when was the last time the Angels had a surprise breakout player? Brock Burke and Bryce Teodosio are the closest examples to fringe value that they've found in the last couple of years, and they combined for 0.9 FWAR in 2025. Teodosio was an undrafted free agent who signed in 2021, and he's been more valuable than 19 of the 20 pitchers that they drafted. And the affinity for brand names over actually doing work to find value doesn't stop at the players. Each of the Angels' last 3 manager hires were made for their names. Joe Maddon joined the Angels in his late 60s, coming off a brutal 2019 collapse with the Cubs. Now, he was a longtime member of the Angels organization, and he was a big part of their late 90s and early 2000s ball clubs. So I'll come right back to this. But after firing him in 2022 and sticking with their bench coach Phil Nevin for the next year and a half, the Angels went even older with their next manager, Ron Washington, at age 72. He couldn't even make it through half of his second season before being relegated to an off-the-field role. To replace him, the Angels have signed former catcher Kurt Suzuki to a 1-year contract. This was after they all but signed Albert Pujols to manage, but then balked at the salary demands. When was the last time you saw a first-year manager sign a 1-year contract? This organization is doing prove-it deals with managers? Or are they officially punting this season and letting Perry's clock run out? They also just aren't successful enough organizationally to be so enamored with hiring familiar faces. Did they really think that hiring Maddon would return them to their early 2000s success? Do they think that Suzuki or Pujols was the answer because they played on the team a few years ago? The team wasn't even good when these guys were playing here. It's such a unique situation where the payroll is at or above league average every year, but it's built on such a cracked foundation that lacks competence or planning. I don't think there's a single organization less predictable year over year than this one. Ohtani was set to walk after the 2023 season. In 2022, he was the MVP runner-up, and Trout finished 8th in voting. Them and Ward were the best 3 hitters on the team, and they were all pretty healthy throughout the season. The pitching staff was also in the top half of the league in terms of productivity. They won 73 games. Trout and Ohtani combined for over 15 WAR, and this team won 73 games. The roster was nowhere near good enough to contend. Ken Rosenthal reported that the Padres made a monster offer for Ohtani at the 2022 deadline, including Jackson Merrill and many of the pieces that went back to DC for Soto. The Yankees and Dodgers also made massive offers in 2022, but the Angels stuck with their superstar. Entering 2023, they had 3 options. Trade Ohtani for a massive haul to kickstart the rebuild, extend Ohtani, or go all in on this loaded free agent class to make one last push. Aaron Judge, multiple potential Hall of Fame shortstops, star pitchers, Wilson Contreras, and more are available. Which path will it be, Artie? It'll be the secret 4th path. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Sign Tyler Anderson and Brandon Drury. Trade for Hunter Renfroe and Gio Urshela. That'll be enough to contend, right? Well, kinda. They were 52-49 on July 26th, 7 games out of the division and 4 games out of a crowded wild card. Again, they're presented with options. The team isn't awful, but it'll take a massive splash and some good luck to make the playoffs. Realistically, the best option is to trade Ohtani now to the highest bidder, since an extension probably won't be happening. Once again, all in right now or tear it down. The Angels have an offer on the table for Junior Caminero, plus 2 of the Rays' other top 10 prospects. That's a total reboot right in front of them if they want it. On July 26th, they officially declared Shohei Ohtani off the market. It's all in. They traded for Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, CJ Cron, and Randall Grichuk. That's all. What, you were expecting more? Ohtani tears his UCL in August, the team goes 8-19 in the month, waives most of their trade deadline acquisitions, then goes 8-19 in September. Ohtani wins his second MVP. The Angels once again finish 73-89. I understand that trading away a generational talent isn't easy, but the Angels held on to Ohtani for all the wrong reasons. They never once truly went all in with him on the roster, and they never even got close to the playoffs in his 6 years in Anaheim. You could say they would have had a chance to make it if not for injuries, but they needed so much to go right for it to be worth keeping him. If it's that unthinkable to trade him away, why not do more to build up the roster in the first place? I think the only reason they kept him at all is so Arte could give the fans a reason to show up to the ballpark in the dog days. That's it. It wasn't a calculated 4D chess move. Arte just wanted to sell tickets in August and September. It would have been different if they had a real chance at signing him once he hit the market. But the Angels reportedly didn't even try to match the Dodgers' contract offer when Ohtani gave them the chance. They knew it was his last season. They knew this roster wasn't near playoff ready, and they kept him to sell tickets instead of flipping him for a potentially franchise-altering haul. That is disgusting mismanagement, and nothing has changed since this debacle. Notice how I haven't mentioned the general manager's name throughout this entire part of the video? That's because Perry Minasian is merely a puppet operating at the behest of Arte Moreno. Perry's no idiot. He's been in baseball his whole life, scouting for the Rangers in his early 20s and working his way up to assistant GM of the Braves in the late 2010s. After the Angels fired Billy Neptler in 2020, they hired Minasian to replace him. Apparently, entering 2023, Perry talked Arte out of signing Trey Turner to a mega deal, saying that this team wasn't just a tray away from contention. That's good advice and a good decision from Perry. The 2023 team plus Trey would not have made the playoffs. They'd have dedicated millions and millions of future dollars to late 30s Trey Turner and never made the playoffs once. Understanding that Perry does have the capacity to view the bigger picture here tells me all I need to know. Perry probably felt the exact same way I did entering 2023, and at the 2023 deadline. He probably saw an Ohtani trade as his golden ticket to bolstering the farm, but Arte needs to approve any deal that's made, and Arte would never let Ohtani leave the Big A while still under contract. All of this is to say that Arte Moreno is the problem. Perry will be extended as Arte's mouthpiece, or leave after this year. In all likelihood, Arte will promote someone from inside the organization or bring in someone else who he knows, and nothing significant will change. The last GM to truly try and lay his own foundation here was Jerry Dipoto, who resigned in July of 2015 while the Angels were leading their division and coming off a 98-win season. Arte tightened his constraints over philosophical disagreements with manager Mike Scioscia, who retired a few years later anyway. Moreno picking Scioscia over Dipoto isn't a crazy move from his point of view, but the fact that he couldn't lead the two to a compromise to at least make it through the end of this season exposes the problem. Arte Moreno is no leader, and every move he's made since that decision is only further evidence. He installed Bill Stoneman as the interim GM after Dipoto resigned. Stoneman hadn't been part of the team's baseball operations in nearly a decade. His trade deadline acquisitions of Shane Victorino, David DeJesus, and David Murphy combined for negative 1.4 WAR with the Angels, who missed the playoffs by 1 game. The Angels haven't gone above 500 since. Dipoto drafted Taylor Ward in his final draft, and the Angels have drafted maybe 3 good players since then. Let's see how DePoto's doing in Seattle, who were in a far worse spot when he left Anaheim.
Let's get
Artie is stuck in his ways. He will always stick with what he knows over any type of innovation or long-term investment. Scouting, analytics, training, development, and recovery are all way behind the good teams across this league, all because of one man's stubbornness. And here's where we get to the uncomfortable part of this video. The culture that Arte Moreno has cultivated, the lack of care and poor attention to detail at all levels of the organization, the comfort with mediocrity, it all led to the death of Tyler Skaggs. The wrongful death civil suit filed on behalf of Skaggs' estate against the Angels organization is currently being heard, and each detail that emerges about this story makes the team look more and more culpable. To recap the situation, Tyler Skaggs died in his Texas hotel room on the night of June 30th, 2019. Pills were found in his room, and the autopsy found a mix of alcohol, oxycodone, and fentanyl in his system. The DEA concluded that a fentanyl-laced oxycodone pill was the catalyst in his death, and that he wouldn't have died that night without ingesting it. Eric Kay, then Angels communications director, was found guilty of selling Skaggs the fentanyl-laced pill. Kay is currently serving a 22-year prison sentence as a result of the criminal trial that took place in 2022. The news you've been hearing about this recently is from the ongoing civil trial. Paragraph 3 from the introduction of this complaint for wrongful death reads the following. The tragedy of Tyler's death was made worse by the revelation that it could have been avoided. Without question, the Angels knew or should have known that Kay was supplying illicit drugs to not only Tyler, but at least 5 other Angels players, i.e. 24% of the team's active roster. Kay had a long history of drug abuse, and the Angels knew about his problems with drug abuse and addiction. The Angels knew that Kay had gone to rehab several times during his employment with the Angels, and that he had overdosed at least once. Despite all of this, Kay had complete access to players, day and night, both off the field and on the field, who the Angels knew or should have known were trying to play through pains and injuries associated with a long baseball season. This was a fatal mistake. The complaint goes on to allege that Vice President of Communications Tim Mead, Kay's direct superior, was aware of all of this and did nothing to put a stop to it. Mead and other Angels execs have denied knowledge of his addiction, but Mead admits that he was aware about some of Kay's concerning behavior. He knew about Kay's relationship with an Angels intern, mediating their situation himself rather than reporting them to HR. He was also aware of Kay taking part in player dares for cash. This story is the one that's grabbed the most headlines so far. Kay was paid cash to take a 90-mile-per-hour fastball off the knee and eat a popped pimple off Mike Trout's back. The cash was used to fuel his drug addiction. Players from the 2019 Angels have testified during this trial, including Trout, who says he confronted Kay about his addiction once he found out about it. He also said that once the players were aware, they stopped with the dares and they stopped giving Kay signed memorabilia. This is all to say, based on what we know so far, that Angels executives went to great lengths to protect Eric Kay and their own reputations when they should have been getting him help. A ton of the warning signs were brushed off as Kay having a bad day or potential mental health issues. I'm not saying that the Angels are the only team where pitchers have popped painkillers to make it through a season. I'm not saying that the Angels are the only team where employees have done gross or demeaning dares in the clubhouse. I'm not even saying that Mead or any of these executives are bad people. I've heard great things about Mead in the past. He seemingly thought he was doing right by Kay by protecting him. But in this case, a young man died a totally preventable death because of the toxic culture within this organization. Mead and some of the other executives have been working for this team for decades. Reading through these court hearings paints a disgusting picture of complacency. Dr. Craig Millhouse, a longtime team physician, also testified, saying that he'd prescribed Kay with over 600 opioid pills between 2009 and 2013, and that he was unaware with how addictive they were. Imagine your doctor not understanding the addictive properties of opiates. You'd probably find a new doctor. Millhouse has worked for the Angels for 31 years, and he's still working for the team. Vince Willett, a former Angels clubby, testified that he saw Kay crush up and snort pills, and Kay asked him to stand guard and make sure nobody else saw as he snorted them up. Willett said that he never reported K's drug use out of fear of losing his own job or being accused of drug use himself. Just like Meade going around HR to mediate K's relationship with an intern, nobody in this org went through the proper protocols to officially report K's drug use. It was an open secret, and everyone was walking on eggshells. And now the blame is being passed around in the circle. There is still no accountability. The fact that K kept his job through all the reported outbursts, a reported overdose, and most of the organization knowing he had a drug problem is emblematic of everything wrong here. They didn't discipline him, try to get him help, or fire him. He was just Eric being Eric on an off day. Nothing to see here. This archaic boys club mentality leaking into the 2020s is despicable to say the least. And obviously, the most important consequence is the tragic death of Skaggs. But it's also the reason why they'll never contend again until Arte sells this team or dies. Arte is at the center of all this. There's no excuse available that he's a hands-off owner and that this stuff slipped by under his nose. He clearly pulls the strings from a baseball operations standpoint. Signing Albert Pujols, Josh Hamilton, and Anthony Rendon were 100% him. Based on the FBI corruption probe that blew up the Anaheim City Council that he bought and paid for, he's heavily involved with the day-to-day of the business side too. That's right, I forgot to mention. Former mayor of Anaheim, Harry Sidhu, was caught on tape saying that he expected $1 million campaign contribution from the Angels after the baseball club purchased Angel Stadium. Arte got a sweetheart deal on Angel Stadium and the surrounding land in exchange for a bribe, and it would have gone through had the FBI not stepped in. You can't tell me that this guy is oblivious about the Angels culture. In fact, he's the one who's setting this culture. He wants it this way. Tyler Skaggs is dead. Eric K is in jail for the next 2 decades, away from his kids. Lower-ranking employees were afraid of losing their jobs. Upper-ranking employees were either unaware of what was going on or actively trying to hide how serious it was. And who knows what else has happened behind the scenes that hasn't been reported on yet. This is why Arte prefers his hires in-house. He wants people who are already friends with people in the organization, so nobody spills the beans. This is a culture of negligence at all levels that has festered thanks to Arte's toxic leadership. They behave as if there are no more improvements to strive for. They're uninterested in developing players or staff. They're comfortable with mediocre executives, directors, doctors, baseball operations, and players. They can't even imagine a world where this team is serious on or off the field. Arte holds nobody accountable, and he's not held accountable himself as long as the Angels are turning a profit. The league will never force a sale as long as the Angels make money. I'm not sure how fans have stuck around for this long, and I don't know how fans can continue rooting for this train wreck, knowing that there's no salvation in sight. All we can hope for now is that some of the veteran-level executives at this team finally put their foot down and push for some change. This trial has been covered thoroughly by Sam Blum of The Athletic, so make sure to go check his stuff out. He's one of the best beat reporters in baseball and easily the best reporter for Angels news. Thanks so much for watching. Shout out to my channel members Misty, Zach G, Ethan, Alex, Mammoth, Zach E, Vikram, El Quacko, JJ, John, Jackson, Ryan, Flyatori, Fifi, Okay Then But Why, GF, Wavy, Perdower, Joshua G, Edmania, DM, TSG, Zeva, Tommy, Joshua S, Delvisional, Nathan, Lorenzo, Drew, Angwen, Penguin, Benny, and Sports Stats. I plan on releasing one more members-only video before the end of this year. Thanks so much for supporting. It truly means the world to me.